one of the biggest history stories of the year has to be the death of the Queen, Elizabeth II. On Monday the 19th of September 2022, I was fortunate enough to go to London to witness a funeral procession of the Queen. Previously the night before I'd queued for 8 hours in the massive queue, running through half of central London to join the last sort of queuers to get a wristband to get into Westminster Hall, the amazing and historic, almost 1,000-year-old hall in the Palace of Westminster. Earlier that day we'd been sat inside the Tower of London in the chapel of St Peter ad Vincula, the place where Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard and many more Tudor figures are actually buried. And what surprised us was the Beefeater was doing a bit of a talk, and he said that he fully expected Charles, as in Prince Charles or now King Charles III, to take the regal name King George VII. He found it a bit of a shock when actually King Charles III was proclaimed as a king. But why is this? It's to do with actually the legacy of the King Charleses of Britain that have gone before him. Join us today as we look at the problem with being King Charles. And remember to support this brand new channel, Learn With Me. Click the red subscribe button down below. So the reason some people did not expect King Charles III to become King Charles III and actually become something different, for example George VII, is because of the connotations of the different King Charleses that have actually been before him. Obviously, there were only 2 others. One of them lost their head, being sentenced to death for treason against his own people, and the other one was described as the Merry Monarch, a man who actually had no legitimate heir to the throne, and actually had 12 illegitimate children with his many mistresses. The King Charleses that have been before did not really have too much of an endearing impact in history in the lives of British people today. But obviously King Charles III's name is actually Charles, and that's obviously the reason why he has took the name. But let's have a little look at the previous King Charleses and why it was a bold decision for the new one to take the name King Charles III. A member of the Stuart dynasty, King Charles I was the man who was sentenced to death by his own people and by his own parliament and government. He was a man who plunged England into civil war, and he was arrogant and believed he had a divine right to rule sent by God. He believed in the divine right of kings, that God had chosen him to rule over everyone else in England. But he also fell out with Parliament massively, and Parliament and the King famously have to get on to be able to govern a country effectively. He also issued many unlawful taxes which greatly punished the people of England, and they resented paying many of these taxes. But there came a point where Parliament had enough, and King Charles I in Nottingham raised his royal standard, and he declared war on his Parliament and government. The English Civil War as it happened was the most brutal conflict and the bloodiest conflict that's ever came to English soil, with thousands of people dying in the various different battles and so on. It actually changed the face of English history forever. There are dozens of castles all over the country that have been slighted by Parliament and blown to bits by massive amounts of gunpowder to make sure that they were put beyond military use. Eventually King Charles I was defeated, with Cromwell's new model army being too strong, and with this it saw an unprecedented event, with the king actually being brought on trial for treason against his own population. King Charles I was seen as a very arrogant man at trial, and he refused to answer any plea, whether he was guilty or innocent of any charge, and he believed he could not be tried by his people, as he believed he was above them. But the day came when King Charles I was sentenced to death by many different judges, and he was actually to be executed on the 30th of January 1649. And that morning a huge crowd gathered to witness an incredible event, which has never once been seen on English soil again, the execution of a ruling monarch. Charles wore 2 shirts that day, and he stated, "The season is so sharp as probably may make me shake, which some observers may imagine proceeds from fear." He did not want to be seen as a coward, and with this he went to the scaffold through the window of the banqueting house, and in front of a huge crowd, an executioner took his head clean off. Obviously this was not a good start for the legacy of the title King Charles. But there would then be King Charles II, the son of King Charles I, who was invited back onto the throne after years of Puritan rule, which greatly frustrated the English people. They were banned from sports, they were banned from gambling, they could not consume alcohol, and people were genuinely fed up. So when King Charles II came onto the throne, there was a huge shift in mentality all across the country. He then ordered a series of executions known as the regicides, in which people all across the country witnessed shocking scenes. He went after those people specifically who put his father to death, including the biggest one, Oliver Cromwell. Cromwell had passed away in the preceding years, and with this Charles II ordered his body to be dug up from Westminster Abbey, paraded throughout the streets, and then posthumously executed. Just simply imagine that. You are walking through London one day and you witness the body of the Lord Protector Cromwell being dragged throughout the streets before it was hacked to bits. Absolutely savage. But that's what Charles II wanted to do. He wanted to punish those people who had executed his father. But Charles II's biggest legacy is the fact he is known as a Merry Monarch. He was a complete shift from Puritan laws, and he was very, very hedonistic, and he's known for being a man who spent huge amounts of money on gambling, on alcohol, on food, on huge lavish parties. But then again, he had many, many mistresses, and he slept around a huge amount. With this, he actually had 12 illegitimate children, and there was no legitimate heir to the throne from King Charles II. This then meant that James II, Charles's brother, took the throne, and this was quite unpopular at the time because James was an ardent Catholic, and many Protestants in England did not like the thought of being ruled by a Catholic ruler. One thing that did endear Charles to the English public was that he actually did help during the Great Fire of London though. But ultimately he was a man who was incredibly hedonistic, and he was known as the Merry Monarch for a number of specific reasons. The fact he had so many legitimate children, he had so many affairs, so many mistresses. But that's why it's so surprising that there is a King Charles III now sitting on the British throne. The first Charles had his head taken off by his own people after losing the English Civil War, and the second Charles was a man who had many affairs and was known as a Merry Monarch, spending huge amounts of money on his own court rather than investing it to the people of England. The current king's choice of name is quite surprising. For example, there hasn't been a Henry IX following the antics of Henry VIII, the man who executed 2 of his own wives. Not many kings would like to follow in the footsteps of King Henry, but with this it is surprising that King Charles III has taken that name. Thank you for watching. As always, to support our channel, please click the red subscribe button down below. You're going to see many different things come to this channel over the next few weeks and months. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. I expect to see field trips, podcasts, interviews. We're going to be going all over the place as well, all over England and Britain, bringing you the best history that's out there. I'm hoping that this channel will grow to become one of the biggest learning communities on YouTube. And by subscribing, liking and sharing and commenting down below, we can hopefully do that. Bear with me as well when it comes to the editing. I'm not an amazing editor, but I am learning and I'm going to get better hopefully. Once again, thanks for watching and do have a lovely day.